All right, everybody, welcome to our session, Teaching with AI, your course design companion. And we purposefully chose those words. We're going to talk about the course design process from a particular context, and Zach actually explained that in just a bit. Companion, as you work with ChatGPT, as some of you have, you kind of have probably got the feeling of this is somebody that's side by side with me and helping me out, and you can really create that relationship. And you'll see that through the examples that we're going to share today and the language that we tend to use when we're doing our prompting, that this is really something that becomes almost like a companion that's working with you side by side, that knows what you need and gets you in a certain way. This is one in our series. This is our 6th so far on artificial intelligence in education. We have all these linked in the slide. You'll get access to the slide at the end of the session. You'll also, at the end of today's session, we'll give you the link to our site that has all of our webinars and then all of the resources from within the webinars that we've created, but also some significant resources that have been shared by the attendees, which has been really impressive with a large and really in-depth group that has a lot of expertise, all of you do, and we want to acknowledge that. And we've been pulling that together so that everybody can benefit from that. You'll also at the end get a link to the YouTube playlist if you're wanting to view any of the prior videos. For example, the one transforming assignments and assessments, we had Danny Liu. That one's got over 1,000 views. That's been very popular. The other ones as well. So let's dive back into today's session. We'll do introductions briefly here. I'll go first because I'm going to turn it over to Zach in just a moment. So I'm Christie. I'm VP for Educational Innovation and Inclusivity at Alchemy. I've been in that role for the last 3 years. And before that, about 25 years in higher education, went up through the faculty ranks. And then I was a faculty developer for about 15 years at the campus level and then at the Cal State system level. So that's been my experience and have always been very closely tied to course design, curriculum and instruction, teaching effectiveness, all those things. At this moment, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Zach Justus.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Zach Justus. I am the Director of Faculty Development at Chico State. I am also a Professor of Communication Studies. I've served in a wide variety of roles. Brett and I first met when I was doing some consulting work for the California State University Chancellor's Office, and he was in that system-wide role. I'm really happy to be with you here today. I've been writing about and experimenting with AI in education since about January of this year. So things have moved quite fast.
Great. Thanks, Zach. All right, Zach, you want me to cover this one?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
So we want to give you a brief overview of the session topics for today. So we are not of the opinion that AI can do everything. So there are certainly tremendous capabilities and also limitations of AI for course design and planning. We will go over how to revise and expand your course descriptions. Brett has some wonderful examples with that from multidisciplinary perspectives. We're going to go over course learning outcomes, which is something that we care a lot about and oftentimes is a little bit lost in the conversation about artificial intelligence and education. And then I'll take over for recommendations of course activities and assessments that directly align with the learning outcomes. It's something I've been experimenting with a lot, and I'm excited to show you some tools and development. And then last, we'll turn it back over to Brett for harnessing AI-driven content analysis to identify relevant module topics. Even as somebody who's experimenting, I was relatively blown away with what Brett was able to produce in relatively short order. And I think that you will be too. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to prop up this poll for you. And when we talk about course design in this context, we're not thinking about it, especially in the context of this webinar, as a sort of expansive 80-page document detailing every aspect of the course. We're thinking about it as the big chunks that you have to do in order to lift a course off the ground. Build modules in a learning management system, prop up slide decks that you will either distribute to students or use as part of a lecture session, develop assessments that align with course learning outcomes, Those are the big pieces that we're concerned with and the things that we're thinking about when we use the term course design. So in reference to that, we'd love to hear what you have to say in terms of what you have experimented with and your comfort level with using artificial intelligence in course design.
And kind of look at this as a 1 to 4 Likert scale. 1 starting out, 4 you're feeling confident you're running with it.
As these are coming in, one thing that Brett and I have talked about quite a bit is that there's a lot of anxiety among faculty across higher education right now with, I feel like I'm behind. And I have to say, even as somebody that has been writing about, reading about, and experimenting with this from the start too, I think we all feel behind because I've never been a part of a technological turnover that has moved this fast before. But if you're here, and if you have ever experimented with an artificial intelligence tool for course design or anything else, you're not behind. A recent poll that was published from Inside Higher Education revealed that only 22% of faculty members surveyed reported that they have used artificial intelligence for anything course related. Maybe they've experimented with it, but only 1 in 5 people has actually experimented with it for their job, for doing a piece of coursework. So if you're here and you've ever opened up ChatGPT, you're ahead of the curve. No worries.
All right, let's take a look at the results here. So pretty good bell-shaped curve there. And I want to acknowledge that some folks put it into the chat and it could be device-oriented, why it was put into the chat instead of the poll, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm kind of mirroring over there in the chat and seeing a similar bell-shaped curve there where we've got a distribution of a lot of 2s and 3s, and then the ends of 1s and 4s. So that's great because we're going to be showing some things that are probably on the low-hanging fruit side of things, and then the things are really pushing the limits of ChatGPT for course design. So I think everybody's going to find a good experience here. All right. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody, on that. And let me close the poll out of my view, and let's go on to the next section. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about critical workload relief and what AI can provide. I know we've been talking about burnout for a long time in higher ed, pre-pandemic, certainly what the pandemic did to cause even more to that breaking point, people feeling like maybe they're coming out of the pandemic and trying to adjust to the new reality. All of a sudden, here comes AI. And I'm calling that the double disruption that people are having to deal with as a reality. We've done a lot of research on that. I'm only going to touch on 2 slides briefly just to set that context, because I think it's important related to course design to look at what we found from faculty. This is 530 faculty of all institution types, all instructor role types. This is what they self-reported as far as the time they spent planning and preparing their course. If that was a first-time new prep, they spent about 38 hours before the start of the term. Sometimes they don't know that assignment, that course, until the day of. Contracts don't start until maybe a couple days prior to the start of the semester, and they've got all these meetings and things to do, logistics, yet they have to spend 38 hours. Now, going into the semester, it's about 7 hours a week that they're spending per course. And in the Cal State system, for example, it's about 4 courses or a 12-unit load, typical faculty members. So you're talking 28 hours per week just on planning and preparing for course, just sort of course maintenance. So that doesn't take into account all the communications, any student support, advising. You've got your service commitments on and off campus. You've got your research and scholarly activity. All of those things wrapped up together becomes quite a load. And 55% of faculty told us they simply don't have enough time to teach effectively. And that's a shame. So that's what students are there for. They're there to learn from the instructors and from others. So that's one look at it. Another way we looked at in a different part of the survey, we asked faculty, what do you think is most important for the student experience? And they told us some great things. This is exactly what you would hope to see. It could change a little bit different in some areas. I don't see inclusivity. That's sort of my lens I'm always looking for. I do see accessibility. Some of these things might include inclusivity, but not explicitly. Anyway, they said a lot of great things about engagement, being active, clear syllabus and expectations, all of those things you would hope for. Well, in a different part of the survey, we asked the same faculty, how do you spend your time preparing for your courses? It was creating content, creating assessments, lecture prep, keeping content fresh and updated, curating resources. Now, those are all important, but they don't always support those important things for the student experience. That call for more and more engagement from students is always out there. And so that left-hand side tends to be our traditional, if you will, comfort zone. And I don't mean to minimize that, but as faculty, sometimes we can stay in that traditional box of that comfort zone and not be able to necessarily stretch ourselves out to what's more important for the student experience. You'll see how we've been able to leverage AI to help make more of that shift today and not make it more workload, not make it as scary, because sometimes that's the wall that's between these two sides is time and comfort level. So we'll look at that a little bit today. More than a little bit. If you're interested in more about the research, we have a full white paper, very digestible and concise, good visuals and analysis and qualitative as well. And that link's in the chat for you to access, or the QR, but I'm going to go ahead and move on for time purposes. Okay, let's hear from you a little bit. You'll get a link in the chat, or if you're on mobile, you can do the QR code. We just want to hear from you. Which areas of course design do you find most challenging or time consuming? Okay, so I'll let you go to the answer garden. If you're following the link, I'll pause here just a moment for the QR code, folks. And I see some chat responses. We'll absolutely always take those. And we are going to be capturing and editing the chat, so that'll be available for folks as well. Okay, so now I'm going to move away from the QR code and let's go into the live answer garden view. And it will take a moment to load. I've noticed with larger audiences, it needs a little bit more time to process. And I will go ahead and refresh periodically so that we'll see that tag cloud change. And it's exciting with such a large group of over 450 that we will truly get some of these to stand out from the others. So assessments, doing good assessments takes time. Getting away from your few high stakes assessments and trying to do more types of assessments and more formative assessments, more frequent assessments, that's huge. We've got ideas for you today, absolutely. Rubrics, absolutely got some ideas for you today. So we're going to be covering that and more. What else stands in the background? Designing modules, gotcha. Activities, absolutely, as part of that. Content development, we've got some of that. We can have a little bit of dialogue. Building assessments, another version of that. Assignments. We'll talk about activities, assignments, and assessments in different ways today. Those can be same or different. All right, let me do one more refresh, and we will capture this and put this into the deck for you as well if it is to be something that's useful for you locally. Great, so we're seeing some more progress on that. Let me see if anything else has stood out. Scheduling. Yeah, we just finished an article on higher ed efficiency with AI, and one of the things was about, let's say, student affairs and some of those types of roles. How can that help for scheduling? How can it help for advising? But not today's discussion. Feedback, yes, that's huge. Effective, timely feedback is the #1 most critical factor for student success. Research shows it, and it's difficult for faculty to keep up with. So we've got some ideas for you, absolutely. Okay, last refresh, I promise here. See if anything else stands out. Feel free to make any comments in the chat as far as what you're seeing. Take a quick look over at the chat. Substantive and regular interaction. So there's RSI is regular and substantive interaction, which is a requirement for online courses. We won't get into that specifically today, but what we're doing certainly enables that to happen. So keep that in mind. All right, let me go back to the slide then. And let's go a little bit forward here. Let's start with our first chunk of course design, looking at your syllabus. The syllabus can often be overlooked as just this sort of contractual formality. There's so much power in creating an effective syllabus and the elements within in particular. I look at the course description and see so much overlooked potential. So how can you give that course description a ChatGPT boost? Now, first of all, I want to acknowledge that there are the official catalog course descriptions, those very brief statements. Those need to exist the way they are because it'll stack up 102 versus 103, 104, et cetera. They're also meant to give some academic freedom and room for instructors to take it in different directions. But when it comes to the syllabus course description, there's so much more potential to go beyond that. So let's look at something here, Bio 103, Sex, Death, and Evolution. This should certainly be a very interesting course and could definitely use a very interesting course description. When I first saw this, and I've been using this example for a couple of years pre-ChatGPT for other purposes, I think of Game of Thrones and stuff like that. Very exciting things that you can present on. So here's the course description at the top. Evolution is the conceptual foundation for all the life sciences. Overview of theoretical and empirical evolutionary biology using examples that involve sex and or death. Designed for non-majors. Tells you nothing about the course, doesn't get you excited about it whatsoever. So I gave this prompt that you can see here to ChatGPT. And so this is an interesting course. What can you create? About 100 words, go. So on the link here, you have access to the chat log. I'm just going to show you the result. So dive deep into the mesmerizing dance of life where sex, death, and evolution play pivotal roles. Venture beyond traditional boundaries to explore how the intimate mysteries of reproduction, the inevitable fate of mortality, and the ever-present force of evolution weave together the intricate tapestry of life on Earth. Through riveting examples, and I won't read it all, and I put bold on some of those so you could see how it's really trying to bring life and excitement and a sense of, journey and connectedness. And then no previous biology experience, no problem. Curiosity is the only prerequisites. Join us. So I'll bring the chat back up. I'll keep going, but I'm just curious if folks have done similar things to the catalog course description, or if they could definitely see potential for this helping them. Now, this gets you starting to think, you and your students starting to think, okay, where's this course going? So let's talk about, dance, and I see delve saying in here, ChatGPT likes to say dance and delve a lot, but I like what's here. I can tweak that if I want to, but yeah, 3.5 loves the delve. Absolutely. I'm glad people have noticed that as well. Let's look at another example briefly. Here's an intro to econ before. Survey of basic economic concepts. This one's a little bit longer, but again, it's not talking about what students are going to be doing necessarily, what connectedness that has to their lives, their journey as they go through this course and beyond. So I'm going to go to the live chat log. And so what that means is this is a link that takes you to actually see what happens in ChatGPT with something like this. So the first part of this post is the course catalog description that you saw on the slide. Now, here is the prompt I've added to that saying, okay, now take that description and take that information and create it in something, a form of prose that will elicit a great deal of interest. So students read it, they have a sense of curiosity and anticipation. I said 125 to 150 words. I know you can create something special. So here's the result here. And I'm not going to read through that, but you can kind of get a sense of how it's covering the same concepts that are in that catalog description, but putting it into a more fluid and more conversational almost language. Also, I like how it flips it more into first person experiential at times, and you can also push that edge a little bit further. I don't like third person description. Students in this course will. Okay. And then, great, I like this description. You know what? Let's look at a 60-second transcript where I can actually create a talking version of this. So the text version is going to be in one format. The talking version is even more conversational. And it gives that sense of humanizing and connectedness where they get to know you as the instructor through that description. So in that one sentence prompt, here's what it came up with. Very detailed in walking me through what I can consider to create this video. It doesn't have to be high production, but it could be with what it's supplied here as far as these different prompts and verses and then tips at the end. So that works really well. I'm going to go back to the slide. Feel free, keep engaging in the chat with each other. Again, with such a large group and large agenda, we're not going to be able to address all of those, certainly. Now let's talk about the next chunk is learning outcomes. And again, if you are familiar with backward design one way or another, those learning outcomes really are set as the anchors for your course and how you design your course and what you should be using to judge your students, of course. So this really helps you with course design and alignment throughout the process. I picked some very simple learning objectives on purpose, and I picked from across some disciplines to give a sampling here. And you can see that these are very limiting. What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to understand? Students will know, what does that mean? Become familiar. Maybe they were already familiar. Have they become more familiar? So these are not particularly well written, I would say, at all. So here's the Chat GPT prompt that I used. You are an educational assessment expert, so you're giving them the role. And for my prompting, I don't use a scripted formula. I suggest that people play around and experiment and find their own methods, but you can certainly start with one of those simple formulas that could be prep or prepare or create. There's different ones out there, and some of you might have favorites, and go ahead and share that in the chat as a starting point. So here you can see the prompt that I've used, and now let's look at the results. And by the way, I can use that prompt. You can use this prompt and then just paste in your outcomes in the brackets at the bottom there, if you're not familiar with how to use ChatGPT prompting yet. And so here's the resulting learning objectives. You can see that this is much more specific and much more measurable, and you can see that there's some sort of related product and measurable that's going in with each of these. So I'll pause there briefly just to say you have access to this chat log, so you can go back and review the steps that took place. And again, you can capture the prompt there as well if you want to, and just see that slight interaction. This was very quick. I can clean these up, of course, if I wanted to. I can prompt it to do something differently. I can say on, objective number 3, I really wanted to change this way, but we're not going to go to that level of detail just yet. Now, when looking at objectives, it's also important to think about the levels of blooms that your objectives may reside at, respectively. So I'm just giving another plug for this version of Blooms here, which takes AI into consideration and gives some recommendations and gets you to think about which levels of Blooms might be best for AI and less likely that you would want students using AI, or where you may want to have more dialogue around those related to certain assignments. I'm just going to focus on levels of Blooms, and what I did was I asked ChatGPT to simply tell me for each of those objectives that you saw on the, this is a new set of objectives. I decided to go with one discipline, Intro to Psychology. I chose that because it's one of the most highly enrolled courses, so most relatable. And these are actually from APA, the American Psychological Association for Intro to Psych. These are the 6 common objectives that they recommend. And so I put those into ChatGPT, and I simply said, and you'll have access to that chat log, I said, with these objectives, analyze them and tell me which level of Blooms each resides at with a parenthetical. And I told it to use Blooms from 2001 or later, because that's when a significant change was made. I didn't want 1956 Blooms. So it gave me the Blooms level for each of these. APA had understand in a different place for some reason. I ordered them, and I would suggest you might order yours in the order from the base level, remember, to the high level create, so students can maybe see a progression of what they're going to be doing throughout the course. So I think that can be a good way to use Blooms to analyze balance and also order them by progression. Okay, so you have access to the chat log, but for time purposes, I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to turn it over to Zach to do a section on activities and assessments.
Hi, everybody, and thanks again, Brett, for setting the table for that so well. So I'm going to talk with you for a bit about AI for activities and assessments. We'll go a little bit back and forth between the slide deck and some of these chat logs. So in terms of activities and assessments, I think most of us hold these near and dear to our hearts. They're sort of a core of what we think about ourselves in the classroom in terms of facilitating teaching and learning. And so it can be rough to let go of how we've done things previously. So the first piece of advice that I have for you is give yourself permission to experiment and be curious. There's mountains of research that with all of these AI tools, far and away the most important thing that you can do is get in and experiment for yourself. And it's an eye-opening process. And start entering some of your own assessments and some of your own assignments, and with a variety of prompts, as Brett was already alluding to, and see where it gets you. I would definitely recommend starting off with existing work and asking for improvement, because it'll give you a baseline. One of the things that can't be lost in this sort of matrix is your role as a content area expert and as somebody with teaching experience. It's something that I'll emphasize throughout this. Another piece that you can do is you can take an advanced assignment, perhaps if you're teaching a senior level or even a graduate class, and ask it to adjust the assignment for novice learners to see what the outcome is. It's also a good way for you to get a feel for how effective is this particular tool that I'm using for the tasks that I'm asking it to do. And on that note, I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that for a lot of Brett's examples, he's using 3.5, and I think that's important for access. In the examples that I'm about to show you, I'm principally using ChatGPT 4.0, and obviously it's an evolving system. So even the ChatGPT that I was using a week ago is different than the one that's available to you today. But we did want to give you a sort of flavor for the variety of tools that are available even in the ChatGPT universe, and then I'll get a little bit beyond that as we go. So with this idea in mind that we're going to use generative AI to help revise assignments, I want to show you a chat log, and we're actually going to spend a good deal of time here. So I thought I would use an example that's inspired by something that I went through last semester teaching a writing course, and something that I think a lot of us have found ourselves in, which is we need assignment revisions because of AI. And so rather than asking ChatGPT to assume a particular persona, I told it, here's who I am. Obviously, this isn't me, but it was for the purposes of the exercise. Gave it some descriptions. I'm teaching an introductory English course, and I need help revising assignments sort of because of AI. Now, I made the mistake of just hitting enter here. And one of the things that GPT does is it gets ahead of itself a little bit. So I had to tell it to stop prompting, because I wanted to give it more specific instructions. Said, let's go slow down and take this one step at a time. And there is research indicating that telling the program to take a pause, be thoughtful, think hard, actually produces better results. And I said, the assignment structure that I'm really struggling with are quick writes designed to build writing skill while engaging a consistent topic. Then I gave the examples of immigration or climate change. I said, what would you suggest as a replacement for these quick writes that could also build writing capacity, maybe with artificial intelligence? So like I said, I was trying to come up with an example that sort of mirrored part of my own experience and also reflected a reality that a lot of us are facing, which is that existing assignment structures, and I have historically used lots of quick writes, are broken by generative AI. So it quickly produced several different assignment types. I landed on this last one that I asked for more information about. So personal reflection with AI feedback, where I highlighted it because I did find it interesting. The idea that students would draw on their own experience and then ask ChatGPT for feedback and expertise. So I told it, I'm interested in number 5. I'd like 3 separate quick writes that build on each other, assignment descriptions, prompts, and a rubric. Each quick write should be worth 25 points, and there should be a balance in form and content. And it quickly produced a pretty robust response. So I especially like number 1 and number 2 in terms of the responses here. Reflect on a personal experience related to climate change. So in this instance, a student would hopefully produce something and then engage ChatGPT in order to produce feedback about it. And then it produced these rubrics down here. Now, I did not particularly like these rubrics. So when we got to the end, I asked it, this is great, expand on the rubric a bit, and please put it in a table format. I will tell you, creating rubrics is the part about course design and preparation that I like the least. The thought of putting everything into tables, I absolutely abhor it. So this was from my own experience. I really want someone else to do this for me. And so then it produced this rubric. Now, if I was doing this for real, for my own purposes, I would ask it for revision. I don't like partial point values. I would like the rubric broken out a little bit in terms of what qualifies as, let's say, outstanding in terms of sentence structure and flow versus just okay. But you can see the potential here, and I could have gotten there with some additional prompting, but I didn't want a particular example to drag on much further. Now, the thing that I was really excited about is that at the end of this, I realized, okay, I have this sort of in the zone of completing this particular task. So now I'm going to ask it for something related. I'm going to ask for a draft email to my department chair who doesn't like artificial intelligence. And with the sort of framework that we had just gone through in mind, it drafted something that would be entirely workable. And it also provided me with some tips about incorporating specifics about contacting my own department chair. So I like that because it saved me multiple pieces of work in the sort of same workflow. All right, I'm going to go back to the deck now. So the issue of grading came up a lot in the answer garden, and I want to go over quickly as an example of how it is that you can use AI to generate timely feedback for students. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion on LinkedIn and Twitter about sort of feeding student papers into these structures. That's not something we're going to go over here. It's not something I've experience with. I think that the tools that I'm going to show you are sort of less controversial and are highly accessible. So there are a couple points here. Use AI to draft common feedback pieces. Use the same approach for large feedback pieces. And then something that I would like to experiment with is encouraging students to use AI for peer and self feedback, sort of similar to what we saw in the quick writes, where a student would produce a draft and then ask ChatGPT for feedback, maybe from a different perspective. Okay. So in this one, I said that I'm no longer an English professor. Now I am a business professor teaching a senior level course. Students have in groups submitted literature reviews that are going to be the foundation for a business plan that will be their final product for this semester. And I need feedback that's pre-scripted. Now, again, this draws from my own experience. I used lots of online grading formats where I'll have pre-scripted comments that I will just drag and drop onto student papers. So in this, it's always a kind of a struggle to create those. Now, in this instance, I asked ChatGPT to create a set of pieces of feedback and to incorporate business authors and concepts. Now, here again is where I want to emphasize your role as a content area expert. I don't know if most of these things that it produced are actual well-known business concepts, authors, frameworks, etc. I am not a business professor. Now, if I had asked it to produce something about, let's say, freedom of speech and freedom of speech law, I could absolutely evaluate it. But that is one of the areas where your expertise and experience comes into play, because you wouldn't just ask it to produce this and use it. You would ask it to produce it, draft it out, and then revise, edit, and check these things based on your own experience and fluency in the field. So again, this is an area where you're handing off the full grading work to ChatGPT or another platform. Instead, you're utilizing it in combination with your own experience in order to save you time along the way. So from a writing perspective and from a development perspective, I thought that these were really excellent responses, the kinds of things that I would like to drag and drop onto student papers. And then, as I alluded to, I asked it to go a step further and say, great, now I need bulk feedback for, a couple major categories of the student experience here. The kinds of emails that I might send to a group if they produce something really excellent, maybe something that was a little bit disjointed. And I don't want to highlight all these. I don't want to take up too much time, but I want to go over this first one because I thought it was a really excellent revision, the kind of thing that would have taken me maybe several minutes to hammer out in person, or I could have ChatGPT draft out something. Maybe in the actual email that I would send to students lauding their project, I include the name of an alum who I would like to connect them with, or it's specific about their project. But all of the basic language is here for me to provide excellent group feedback on a project that I would like to encourage. Okay, the last piece that I want to highlight here is another sort of common task that we find ourselves in when it comes to course design, and that's deck creation. So this is an example that highlights a different tool, may eventually get wound into ChatGPT, but for now it's a different tool. So I'd encourage you to experiment with different tools. Some are paid. The kind that I'm going to show you, it has a freemium version. And I want to shout out to my friend and colleague, Joshua Whittinghill, who vetted this with me, because I think this is great. He's a ITC, and he helped me understand that a lot of faculty are finding this particularly useful. So you can create prompts for slide decks from existing texts. You might want to start by asking it to create a deck that's similar to something that you already have. That way you can evaluate whether or not the tool is actually doing a good job, again, leaning into your own expertise. The thing that I want to show you is an example where I stack tools together. I asked ChatGPT-4, which is the most powerful tool I have access to create an explanation of the Electoral College that I might give to an introductory political science class. And then I asked the program Gamma to create a slide deck based on the description that ChatGPT created. And the slide deck is not going to win any awards. It is pretty good. And it is a lot like the thing that I would probably show students and walk them through. I especially like the incorporation of visuals into this particular product. Again, this is Gamma. It is a freemium version. I have the free version. The paid version is relatively inexpensive. Regardless, it's a tool that you might want to experiment with, like I said, perhaps in collaboration with another tool in order to maximize the chance that you're going to get something that actually saves you work rather than something that you'll simply have to edit every portion of. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Brett for the next section.
Sorry, unmute myself here. Now you get to watch the amazing chat that's taking place. It's rich with a lot of dialogue and exchange and information. Good Q&A, and people geeking out. Pretty cool. So let me go back to the deck here. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm getting stuck for a second here. Let me go back to Chrome. Okay. All right. As I go into module lesson design, as Zach was talking, I thought of a conversation. I had a buddy from 30 plus years ago that called me, and he's an adjunct instructor. And here we are in week 10, and he was describing to me how still at this stage in the semester, this new prep he's been given, he is spending 8 hours each weekend trying to get ahead and get the next module ready for students, and that, you know, that race and that just overload. And it made me reflect. He's not an AI user, unfortunately, but I just thought of that scenario that luckily he's able to work through that and make it work. And he knows it's hopefully a short-term thing, but still to think of people working that much on the weekends just to do the basis of their job is tough. So here's looking at module design and what this can do now, really powerful. So here's the beginning prompt. As I see that link at the bottom, go to chat log. So again, I will go to a chat log, and what you're essentially seeing, and you'll have access to through these slides, is a view-only version of what I've done. It's kind of like the Google Doc view-only version. I will also be going into a live ChatGPT prompting scenario, and I'll show you where you can share chat logs with others, because that can be great to share with colleagues. So I'm teaching this 14-week college level intro to site course. I'm using a learning management system. I want to have an online module for each week. Suggest 14-week module outline for me that includes the title of the module, a few of the topics to be covered in the form of module level outcomes. I know you do a great job with flowed module topics and respective module outcomes. I'm just trying to reinforce that to them. And also I've noticed that ChatGPT with outcomes will sometimes use the term understand, and that's not measurable. So I tell it not to do that. Just like it also likes to quote learning styles when those don't exist. Those have been debunked. I have to tell it that from time to time. So let me go to the chat log here.
Brett, you need to share.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, folks. Okay, let me go back. And it's still not sharing. My apologies. Okay. Okay. What I was describing, you're going to get to see again. So let me go back and you'll see it in action here. Thanks for prompting me, Zach. I didn't see what was going on in the chat. Okay, so I told you what the prompt was. I'm going to go to the chat log now. And there we are. Again, this is view only chat log I'm sharing with you. So there's the beginning of it that you saw on the slide. Absolutely, it says, here's that 14-week module outline. Those are the objectives within. Again, as the expert in this content domain, I can review those and decide what's best. I can take it as is. I can tell it to redo something, retitle something. I can have it reorder things, whatever that might be. It's pretty easy to do. So here's the 14 module titles and their respective outcomes. So I said, great, I can work with that. And then I even said, you know what, just strip out the 14 titles. I did it for this presentation so I could paste them into a slide, but you might also want to then take those 14 and tweak those, and then you can feed those back to ChatGPT as a list and say, okay, now rerun that same process with these 14 objectives as I've described them. So that's a way where you can do a quick back and forth and get to the exact 14-week module titles and outcomes pretty quickly and be in control over ChatGPT. Okay, so there's that chat log. Now, here's that list of 14. What I'm going to do now is dive in and say, okay, let's focus on sensation and perception, module 4. So what would that look like? So here's the prompt that I asked for ChatGPT to use is, okay, I'm using OpenStack Psych 2 textbook. Students will be reading chapter 5 on this module topic. I want you to suggest additional experiences. Suggest a related video of approximately 10 minutes, because we know by research again and again that after 10 minutes, viewership and attention span goes down. I said TED Talk because those tend to be in that range of time. They're inspirational. They have industry and other experts. They have closed captioning. They often have educational resources bundled with the video. So there's a lot of benefit there. It did really well with that. I said, pick one interesting research-based article online. It did not do well with that. It hallucinated multiple times. I finally picked the article and said, use this one. Took me 5 minutes, no big deal. You got 80% of the rest right, or overall right. Next, I want an activity for students. I don't want an LMS discussion board. They've gotten tired of those. Give me something more interesting. Create a 10-question quiz with these types of questions, and it's going to give me the results by default, or the answers, I should say, by default. So I'm going to go to live chat GPT. So let me exit out, and good, I still have it up here. So this is where I am in the process after going back and forth with it a couple times, mostly telling it, no, that article is a dead link, it doesn't exist, then feeding it an article. Let's see, 14-week. Let me go to live chat GPT. Darn it. I had this propped up all morning. There we go. So now I'm in the live view, and here's what's happened, and I described to you where we are in the process. So here, it's now given me the module. So again, online, I can have the module title, and then the students are given the description for the module, which I'll show you in a second. I like doing the module first, then creating the description of what's been created. So they have a reading assignment, chapter 5. There's a video. They have the link to it. It created the description, good description of it. It created the link in there. The online article I fed to ChatGPT and said, make this part of the module. The online activity that it created. Now, Zach and I both had a reaction to this one. I think it's great, but equity to me jumped out right away, because how many students have access to these VR headsets? It's giving an alternative, but still it's creating an inequitable experience in some ways. So I would need to know that if this is an on-ground course, for example, that students have access to an XR lab that has headsets they can use. So I would analyze this, analyze the instructions, make sure they have access. Maybe I make it a partner activity to make sure that they're working together and can get through that experience successfully. So think about that as you're looking at some of the instructions. And then here are their prompts. And then what they'll do is they'll do a flip video reflection and analysis on their experience, and they'll do a little bit of responding and reading across the group. Then there's the quiz with the questions, the possibilities, and the correct answer. Again, you can edit any of those. And then, okay, now for the final touches on module 4, I want you to create a module overview description. Once I'm happy with it, now I want it to describe it. And this kind of blew me away. This is using version 4. So here's the description it created. So now at your module 4, you can have a module overview page that students can read in about 30 seconds. That'll give them a sense of what they're about to experience. It starts to evoke a bit of thought, a little bit of feeling about what's going to take place. And it created these little icons as well, which I think you can use consistently throughout to give them a sense of what they're going to be experiencing. So then I thought, you know what? I want an image for my module overview page. You can see the very brief prompt I put in here. And within about 30 seconds, it created 2 images. I really liked both. Again, I'm screening for any biases. I'm screening for any, let's see what else, any way it might be off. Also, if it's stereotyping is the word I was trying to think of. So I thought it did a good job. I accepted these. There's a little download icon. They're high res, good quality in this case. And look at this. By default, it just gave me a description. I can take that as alt text and do any adjustments I need to, but does a pretty good job there as well, all in seconds. And I know creating alt text is something that takes time. People have to retrofit. They don't have the expertise necessarily to do that or the time. So nicely done. Now I went down a little bit further. How long do you think it would take the typical student in this course to complete all of the elements of the module? So it did a breakdown of all the things that were assigned. And I analyzed this, and there were a few of these where I said, okay, we can lop off a little bit of time. I know that chapter, typically it's a little bit less, maybe 30 minutes less. TED Talk, yes, that's about 10 minutes. For their reading the article, that was appropriate. VR experience was appropriate. The flip discussion video, that should be shorter, 30 minutes to an hour for them to prepare that. And then for the participating, about an hour at most for that. So I lopped off a couple hours. They said 6 to 11.5 hours. I figure it's going to be about 6 to 9 hours. And if you're using traditional Carnegie or other formulas of 1 hour of contact time to 3 hours of where students are doing independent work, this is a 3-unit course. 6 to 9 hours is right in that ballpark. So I like that because you want to give students a sense of how much time so they can do time management. Some people use the Rice University workload estimator. ChatGPT does a pretty good job of this as well. So that I thought was good. Now at the top right, you see that little share icon. That's where you can grab the link and share this with someone as a chat log where they would get the read-only version. Now, caveat, it won't share this one, and that's why I didn't give you the link to the chat log for this, because it has an image in there, and they're trying to be sensitive about sharing images. So this one you won't have access to, but what I've done instead is I made sure that I provided the prompting in here and the output in here in these slides. Okay, so you have the results. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I won't show you this, but you have access to the chat log. I thought, well, what about those that want to deliver this strictly in class or have an experience like this in class? Well, then here's an example of how whatever number of students you can put in. I put 40 students, not too big, not too small. And then how can you create a lesson to engage students? So I did that. And I also said, okay, what would it look like in a smart classroom where there are pods of students working together? They've got a monitor, and it did a great job of explaining how the students can work in their own groups, how they can share across groups, and how things can be displayed to the whole class, and how the instructor can come in and show different things from the group work. So it does a lot really, really well. Zach, anything significant from the chat to address at this moment before I go into the next section?
No, you're doing great. We've been able to answer most things on the
Okay.
live chat.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go into full screen mode again. And hopefully people are seeing how you can get our chat logs and all of our prompts and things like that. Great. And Ivan has a raised hand. Let's go for it briefly. Ivan, if you want to come on mic, we'll keep it brief though. Okay, for time purposes, I might skip. We're looking at less than 10 minutes left, which is about right. Let's try and capture. You've been doing a lot in the chat, but we want to have a place in Padlet here where we can capture some of your thoughts. So the link is going into the chat right now. I'll pause for a moment while some of you get started. I'll pause on this QR code just to give everybody a chance. And we'll go into Padlet, and we've got a few categories where we'd like to get your thoughts about some of the things that you've been able to do, what's been working well. You could list some challenges as well, but do some sharing within these categories. Okay, so QR folks, hopefully you're set. I'm going to move on to the link myself, so we're all in together. And we're just going to take a few minutes here. And through the slide deck, you'll have access to, and you can also capture it on your browser right now, but you'll have access ongoing to this Padlet. And you can go from left to right, or you can just go to one of these that you feel most compelled to respond about. Don't feel like you have to do all of them. There's a lot of you, so there will be a lot of rich sharing here. Great. Being more creative with syllabus examples. Help with content writing. Yeah, and also, and I'll talk about that briefly. As I showed that example for creating one module, once I get a good model of prompting and process set up, I could unleash ChatGPT to say, okay, now do the other 13 modules in a similar way. But I can also tell it, make sure that you offer a variety of activity types, of content types. Make sure for each of the module overview descriptions, you vary the language. Don't delve and dance every time, that type of thing. And it does it really well. You just have to provide the guidelines for it, and it will do pretty much what you ask. So you can, at that point, unleash all your modules and then go through this mega review, but it's probably going to be more manageable for you to do it module by module and do that pretty quickly and kind of say, okay, I'm done with this one, let's move on. But there is that power and possibility. But it's a massive output. Okay. Zach, feel free if you have any comments about what's being posted here in the Padlet.
Sorry, I was trying to respond in the chat. Yeah, no, I'm just now getting caught up over on the Padlet. Apologies.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the assessment feedback column, creating UDL, multiple options. Love that. I'm actually doing a deep dive on across the 3 UDL principles and elements within and how ChatGPT can enable that. So I've got a lot of resources that I'm developing, a lot of examples that I'm developing that I'll be sharing out in different ways, probably webinar, conferences, publications. Yeah. Early on with ChatGPT, I started seeing possibilities for enabling UDL. When 4V came out, blew my mind. I'm like, okay, great. We can go from text to speech to video or the other way around. And we've got multimodality, multiple access points. We've got more accessibility, universal design. Love it.
You know, one of these comments in the lesson module construction has to do with provide choices for completion of assignments. And I think that speaks directly to a conversation in the chat about student utilization of ChatGPT to create assignments, which obviously is something that a lot of us have been concerned about from the start. And I think that one of the things that we're going to need to do is reconsider why it is that we're assigning particular things, what learning outcomes those are servicing, and whether there's a better way to do those. And part of the power that I'm hoping that what Brett and I have shown today illustrates is that you're not doing that on your own. You know, the kind of thing that might have normally required a faculty learning community working together over the course of the semester to come up with a whole litany of alternative assignments. You know, now you have a partner for that at least helps get you started. And so those are tough problems to answer, but you are not on your own in answering those. And you can ask those questions of the same tools that have disrupted the systems that we've had in place for generations.
Yeah, and that disruption is causing a lot of pain, but it's also pushing us in ways that, you know, in some ways we needed a push as far as assessment types and things like that. So, okay, great. I look forward to everything that you've created here, and I hope that's helpful across the community. I know we're in our last 5 minutes, so I'm going to bounce us back. And again, you'll have access to all of that. Okay. Just real quick, again, how, you know, there's ChatGPT and obviously there was Dev Day that happened this week, and there's so many new developments that we're not really touching on today, but we will be in the near future. But the way that we're leveraging ChatGPT is we've got this Curie platform that we're using. It's for educators and academic champions, designers, et cetera, to build learning resources and experiences. And we've been doing that as sort of individual resources, but now with ChatGPT, with this platform, we're really looking at the full design process and how that can be rolled out pretty quickly and effectively. And so what we're doing is really baking in learning science, which has been most of my career for 30 years now. And also the prompting that you've seen today, we're baking that into these optimizers. So for those who aren't particularly adept or comfortable and don't have the time to go crazy and become high level with ChatGPT, this can really help you do it and help you do it in a way that is really good structured course design. And for those that are learning designers, it's looking at a blueprint type process, but not having to have all of that in front for the instructor and for the learning designer. And that 14-week development process that's often a very complicated and sometimes frustrating dance between the learning designer and the instructor. that can be really relieved and accelerated. And I'm thinking conservatively that there can be probably 50% offload of the hands-on tasks and person-to-person meetings that take place. So we're really developing this high-end course design platform to leverage ChatGPT in effective ways. And so this is just a snapshot of one of our current optimizers and how we would offer this to an instructor, and they could say, yes, I want to use AI, and it would start turning on ChatGPT in the background, in the prompting in the background, and then they're giving us what's in the brackets here in these fields, and we're feeding that into the prompts. And after a series of a few screens like this, they've got a grading rubric that they can then download and adapt or adopt in a matter of minutes. And rubrics are a good example because they take time to develop well. It takes a time investment to then get all the returns that you get over time, which is quite significant, but it is a barrier for some people. So we're trying to remove barriers, but still have, good practice taking place. So we have a freemium version. We'll give people access to that as well, so they can be using it. So here's, at the beginning, I mentioned we have our Higher AI and Higher Ed playlist. So there's the link to the YouTube channel. And then also we've got our website with collated AI resources, and they're embedded across our webinars, but we also have additional resources that people have found useful as well. So feel free to use that as a common place to find a lot of these resources. And I know people have their sources here as well. And some of you who are part of this session are great sources for these types of things. This is where you can find us. We're closing down here. And so we'll go ahead and pass on to just a thank you for your presence, your participation, your contributions. Hopefully this was a valuable hour learning experience and sharing experience for you. I want to thank Zach again for all of his expertise and just making this an awesome process and building this together, and all the great stuff that he created and delivered today. And thank you, Alchemy team, for all your background in making this session work. So thank you, everybody. And
thanks, everybody. This was so much fun.
It is exciting. Yeah. And hopefully people are feeling excitement and joy as they get into this. And again, play, become familiar, and then you'll start to own it more and more if you're not already at that stage. If you were at the 1 and 2 on the curve of the poll, just get in there. Also, big plug, I don't make any money or get a kickback on this, but $20 a month is what it costs for ChatGPT Plus. And now it's got DALL-E and other analytics and all that wrapped in. It'll continue to expand. Think of that $20 and how much time it saves you. And now, hopefully in the near future, there will be enterprise licenses and you'll be given this. But for now, I'd really encourage you to adopt the Plus version and the power of that for that $20 a month. I'm a believer in it.